Hello folks. I haven't done one of these walking videos in a while. I haven't even been out here in a while, honestly. I'm not technically supposed to be out here. This is like I'm trespassing, although no one's ever back here and it's totally unclear who owns this property. It's literally just forest. So I kind of just come back here anyway. So I want to talk about fragmentation, internal fragmentation, and what it is. You probably, if you watch this kind of stuff, you already know what it is, but I'm going to briefly explain what it is. Who is at risk for having more fragmentation than the norm, and what that will look like in your life. So when we're talking about internal fragmentation, we're talking about having many parts of yourself. Sometimes many parts of yourself that are in conflict, although it's not necessarily conflict. It's just having many parts of self. So kind of like the whole split personality thing, except we're not pathologizing it. And it's not so dramatic. It's not like you're snapping into these different personalities and forgetting who you are. It's more subtle, and as you move through your day, you're just going to naturally move into these different parts of yourself depending on where you're at and what you're doing and how you're feeling. So first of all, we have different parts of ourselves. That's normal, that's healthy. For example, you have a part of you that wants to be lazy and sit around all day. You have a part of you that likes to cook. You're never gonna cut that off and make yourself really one-dimensional. Now, the issue comes in with fragmentation where the fragments are based on trauma. So when the fragments wouldn't exist without trauma, basically the trauma created them, otherwise they have no reason for existing. That is where we get into territory where things can become painful, we can develop problems. What makes a person have a lot of fragments? One thing. This is key. You will have a lot of fragments if you had to suppress a lot of who you were. Flies. Say that again. You will have a lot of fragments if you had to suppress a lot of who you were in order to stay safe in the social unit that you were in. So right off the bat, we can start to see how certain types of people are at risk for having more fragments. This is going to be important for you if you are more mentally, emotionally, and physically sensitive than the average person. Maybe not physically, but emotionally at least. That's the first thing. This is going to matter if you're that. Second thing, you've had a lot of trauma. So some people haven't. So again, the sensitivity makes it so that things in childhood could seem very traumatic. Basically, you're more easy to traumatize, is what I'm trying to say, when you're sensitive and you're a child. Your nervous system is more easily overstimulated and overwhelmed, and that's like a purely physiological thing. It's not about weak versus strong and all this nonsense. It's a physiological thing. So that puts you more at risk for excessive, more fragmentation, is sensitivity. The second thing is simply having a lot of trauma. So I'm someone who lived a very average, sheltered, safe life. So I would not be in the category of people who have more trauma than average. I definitely have very average amounts of trauma for a lucky white person in the US. Very average, very typical kind of stuff that I deal with. So that gives me a little bit of an advantage in the sense that maybe there won't be quite as much fragmentation, even though there's a high degree of emotional, mental, physical sensitivity. Does that make sense? So if there's a high degree of sensitivity and there's also a lot of negative influence in your upbringing, whether it's, at worst, abusive parents, or at best, maybe a lot of emotional neglect or a lot of criticism or something, this counts as, an environment that's going to contribute to more fragmentation for you. So those are the two things: sensitivity and how much trauma have you really dealt with. What is this going to look like in your life as an adult? So think about this in a very literal way. When there's lots of different parts of you and they're all going in different directions, what does that create? Confusion, hesitation, indecision, self-trust issues, self-doubt, feeling like you don't have it figured out when you should, feeling like you have too much baggage and there's something wrong with you, right? Because again, this is not being reflected in your environment. And it was the same thing possibly when you were a kid. This was not being reflected. No one else was having this issue. No one else was having this experience. And so thankfully people are getting a little bit more on board with this, and they're able to, there's a whole movement toward conscious parenting, where we're actually learning what our kids are like and then structuring things according to that, like creating environments that actually make sense for the kid. None of us, if you're an adult watching this video, it's highly likely you did not have that. Long story short, it's very possible you're going to end up with these splits, right? So confusion, hesitation, all that stuff, like I just said, that's the main thing that's going to give it away that you have this. Feeling like you can't trust yourself to make decisions, changing your mind a lot, feeling really cloudy and unclear. So as you get in touch with these parts of you through whatever form of shadow work you're doing, things are not going to be a secret anymore. Like, there's not going to be that confusion, because you're going to know exactly why you're having certain reactions. You're going to know exactly why you feel a certain way. There's just not going to be any more mystery to any of it. It's at this point where you have the logical awareness that you can start to decondition yourself from outside conditioning. So you might know you have a part of yourself that feels a lot of shame or guilt. These injured parts are very easy to condition from the outside. People can walk in and just tell you, like, this is what you need to do, and parents, the school system, all of that in your history, peers, even, like, just social groups in general. It becomes very easy for anybody on the outside to condition those wounded parts, because they're already wounded, right? So in your adult life, you're going to end up with these same outside influences having that same exact effect on you. So it gets very weird and meta. Like, for example, I had a job years ago, and I eventually came to realize that I had the exact same flavor of relationship with the man at the job as I did with my dad, and the exact same flavor of relationship as I did with my mom with the woman who worked there. There's two main people that I would interact with and have shadowy stuff come up, and then I finally just looked at them one day and I was like, holy shit, mom and dad. So this is what, when you're in the logical phase of healing, you're going to see a lot of this. It's just going to be a lot of observation. You're going to feel like you're not getting anywhere. And you're just going to be becoming aware. It's going to be like all day long awareness. It's like an awareness festival. And This is also the phase where you can be doing a lot of purging. So emotional purging, usually there's going to be a lot of grief. I think for most, I don't know, maybe not most people, for me there was quite a bit of grief. I think for other people it's the same way, because there's a lot of needs being unmet, there's a lot of regret, things that didn't go the way that you wanted them to go. You did not have an easy time with this. You know, life is not set up for people like us. So it's not about going into like victimhood or something, and it's not about pitying yourself, because that's bullshit. It's about compassion and realizing that you now have the opportunity to rewrite the entire thing. The magic of this is that when you do this for a long time, when you do shadow work and parts work, specifically parts work for a long time, you start to be able to make different decisions because you're fed up with suppression. So the parts of you that have been suppressed, that are not getting anything they need, and they're miserable and they're acting out and they're making you eat like 1,000 donuts or yell at people or like scream at people and quit your job, like these parts are going to be making you do all this horrible shit that you don't want to be doing because they're so wounded and they're so not heard. So as soon as you start making time every week to hear them, the desperation factor disappears. So these parts are no longer desperate. When they're no longer desperate and they're being respected and heard and considered, their needs are being taken into consideration, they can now start to function more normally, or how you want them to. You can stop having that parent-child relationship with yourself where it's like, oh, I ate the junk food, now I'm gonna yell at myself. You know, that bullshit, you know, or like, oh, I went and dated the wrong person again, I'm such an idiot. You're bad, you know, that parent-child bullshit goes away and you become an adult, slowly but surely, with all of these parts just becoming friends with each other and working toward common goals that you have. This is the unity piece that makes this all worth doing. So all the parts coming together, working toward goals that you have and things that you want and how you want your life set up, the way it should have been set up for you from the beginning. The final piece in all of this is when we can start to make different decisions that support ourselves and the life we want. So we are no longer conditioned. These parts are deconditioning over time. This is exactly like behavioral psychology, where they talk about like Pavlov's dogs, and you ring the bell and they salivate. This is what you're actually doing for yourself over time. That's why I always say there's no such thing as a quick fix. Everyone who's selling you a quick fix is lying and trying to get your money. Maybe they don't know that they're lying. Maybe they mean well. But anyone who's selling you a like deprogram your nervous system in 2 days, they're wrong. It's not gonna happen. When those parts are no longer suppressed, you will 1% at a time start to make different decisions in your day-to-day life, because you will no longer feel that intense resistance, separation, confusion, self-scolding. Like, it just goes away little by little by little by little. So little by little, we work these things out and we translate this internal tangled confusion mess into actual concrete things that you can do in your life. So, okay, based on what I now know about this part and this part and this part, I'm going to go make this decision, which is best for me. And that's where you start to see things literally change, finally, and for good. This is the deconditioning process. This is what shadow work and parts work offers you, and that is all I have for you today.